Thank you so much for listening, and Pablo, the stage is yours.
Well, hi to everybody. It's a pleasure to share with you the experience of the Commission of the Tribunal, International Tribunal on the Rights of Nature that visited Bolivia last year in August. So the short version is Bolivia is the country which in 2010 we adopted the Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth. And this declaration became a law of the plurinational state of Bolivia that same year in December, and it's known as the Bolivian Law of the Rights of Mother Earth, law number 71. So we don't have the rights of nature in our constitution as Ecuador, but we have it as a law. And as you all know, in many international forums, the government of Bolivia and also the civil society social movements have championed for the rights of Mother Earth. And so now we're going to look at a case to see how these rights of Mother Earth have been implemented, what has happened, and what are the conflicts. And we're going to focus on one specific case, which is called the case of Tipnis. And so first I have to explain you what is Tipnis. So Tipnis is a national park and an indigenous territory. It has 1.2 million hectares. Let me see if I can share you this. Tell me if you see it. Do you see?
Yes.
Oh, you see it. Yes. But let me share you something. You see my entire screen, okay? So this is Tipnis. You can see here it's in the heart of Bolivia. And if you are able to see the dots, the black dots show where the communities are. There are around 62 communities in this indigenous territory and national park. And this, the national park was created in the 60s and the indigenous territories in the 90s. And it was the government of Evo Morales who gave the title to the indigenous people. There are mainly three indigenous nations there, the Chimanes, Mocetenes, and Mojeño Trinitarios, who live in Tipnis. And they have the title since 2009. So what happened was that in the year 2008, the government began or took the decision to build a road that was going to cut the Tipnis. You see the black line, well, that is the road that was going to go from, to make it easier, from the city of Cochabamba to the city of Trinidad. And this road was going to cut into this national park and indigenous territory. So, this road began to be built, especially the part that is before the national park and the part that is after the national park. They divided the road in three, and they were building the first part and the third part, and the second one, which is in the Tipnis, that was not yet being built. But the problem is that this project of this road started to be built in 2010 without an environmental impact assessment study of what was going to be the impact of this road in the Tipnis. until now, there is no official document of an environmental impact assessment report in relation to the road and what it's going to create in the Tipnis. And the second thing is that the road began to be built without the informed prior process of consultation to the indigenous people that live there. So we suddenly were in the middle of a very big conflict because we, the champions of the rights of Mother Earth, were going to build a road through a national park, a protected area, without this environmental assessment report. And we, the champions of indigenous people, were building the road without consulting the indigenous people. So a little bit about this national park. I posted a link in the chat where you can find an article in English where you have data about the plants, animals that live there. It has been said by some that this is the most beautiful jungle of the world. It is the place where it rains the most in Bolivia. And I just want to share you one of the specimens, if you can see it here. He is called the blue unicorn. It is it's a bird. It weighs 5 kilos. It only exists in Tipnis, and there are only 200 species of the blue unicorn. And of course, if the road is built, the blue unicorn, who is already a species, an endangered species, can disappear totally. So from the perspective of nature, we are not speaking about any national park. It is a very biodiverse national park. So the indigenous people began a march to the city of La Paz to ask the government to stop building the road. This was in the year 2011. They started the march in August, and they were marching for almost more than a month when they reached a place that's called Chaparina, and there was a big repression. 500 policemen came, and they began to detain indigenous people that were in the march, separating women from the children that were also part of the march. So it was a process of repression that was incredible. In reality, the history of the government of Evo Morales is divided by this issue, because nobody expected that there would be police repression, 500 policemen against a march of 1,000 indigenous people. And this happened in this place that's called Chaparina. You can find the videos in YouTube. And we also have a video that I will share you the link in the chat where you can see images of what happened there. Well, after that repression, there was a backlash against the government. There was so much solidarity with the indigenous march that wanted to stop the road, that they were received in La Paz as heroes, and the government couldn't do nothing. He had to approve a law in the parliament that establishes that the road is not going to be built, and establishes that this area, this national park, cannot be touched. We say in Spanish, intangibility, I think it's the translation, but it means that it cannot be touched. So this was a great victory in the year 2011. The road was stopped, but the history of Tipnis is a saga, no? It's a saga of victories, betrayals, counteroffensives, and just 1 year after that, the year 2012, the government promoted another march of the what we would call the coca producers, the colonos. If you can see the map, you will see what it says Polígono 7. No, there is a red line around that part. Well, this is also part of the national park, but this park is a part of the park that has been invaded by mainly peasants that are coca producers. So in this part, you will have coca producers that are planting coca leaves. And you have this red line because for many years there has been a conflict until in the year 1990, there was established what we call the red line. Okay, coca producers will stay there but cannot go beyond. But if the road is built, of course, this will promote that coca producers will begin to go into the national park. And of course, this group of peasants who are also indigenous people, they are mainly indigenous people, not from that area, but they have migrated from the Andes, from the Aymara and Quechua region. They speak Aymara and Quechua, mainly Quechua. Many of them, or the majority of them, are in favor of the road. So the government promoted another march from this sector of coca producers asking for the road. And in the year 2012, they came to the city. There was no repression against them. The president met them, and the parliament approved another law that said, oh, since there are two positions, now we're going to do a process of consultation if the road is going to be built or not. Of course, this was against the previous law, the law of the year 2011, that said that, oh, no, you cannot touch that national park. But the government moved on. They did what we say a fake process of consultation. They consulted mainly those communities where they could get some kind of support in favor of the road. And they did a process where they said, oh, if you accept to build the road, then you can have more schools, electricity, drinking water, and others. So this process of consultation done by the government was challenged by the Human Rights Assembly of Bolivia, the church, and other international institutions. There is a shadow report that says that was a very bad process of consultation. It's really something that didn't follow the principles of consultation to indigenous people that are established in the UN. But the government said, okay, see, now we did a process of consultation, and the majority says that they want to build the road. But at that moment, 2012, still many of the leaders were against the road. There was only one organization of what is called Subcentral Tipnis. So the government waited for almost 7 years until in the year, 6 years, until in the year 2015, 2017, it was approved a new law in the parliament that says, okay, we forget about previous laws, the laws that says that you cannot build a road, we're going to build the road. So the conflict of Tibnis came back into the table during the year 2017. And again, indigenous communities began to react, but in a much more difficult situation, because what the government did was to divide the organization of indigenous people of Tibnis. So when they approved the law, they had two organizations, one that was in favor and another one that was against. And the one that was against, which is the traditional organization of Tibnis, went to the fourth session of the International Tribunal on the Rights of Nature that was taking place in 2017 in Bonn, Germany. And they went there and they said, hey, we want you to come to Bolivia. We want to present the case that the government has done this, and he wants to build this road, which is going to have a huge impact. Let me show you an image of what will be the impact of this road. So this is from a study that shows that currently here you see this is the 7 polygon, as we call, where the coca producers are. If the road is built, what we will have in around 18 years is what you see in the third image. Around 60% of Tibnis will be deforested because of the process of colonization, of land grabbing, of new settlements that will come into the park. So the delegation that went from the indigenous communities of Tibnis to Bonn, to the tribunal, said, look, this is what's going to happen. And we want you to send a commission to Bolivia to see there really what is happening, to speak with us, to see what is this national park, this indigenous territory, to visit also the people, the peasants that are coca producers, to see what has happened in that part where they live, how it has been already deforested. As you can see already in the first image, 60% of what is in the polygon 7 has been already deforested. So they wanted the commission to come to Bolivia to speak with everybody, to speak also with the government, to hear from all different sources, from parliamentarians and so on. So in August of last year, a commission where Alberto Acosta, Enrique Viale, Shannon Biggs, and Hannah Begovic came to Bolivia. They arrived, they went to Tibnis. There was a meeting in the middle of Tibnis in a place that's called Trinidad, in a community there. There were around 200 persons, representatives that came there and explained for more than 1 day and a half what was the situation, what was the history, what were the impacts, and why they were against it. So this commission of the tribunal heard all the testimonies, and then they went to speak with the leaders and representatives that are in Polygon 7. There was an invitation from the indigenous organization of Polygon 7 that was made public, saying that they wanted also to speak with the tribunal, with the commission of the tribunal. So they went, but when they arrived there, they were not allowed. So this is one of the headlines. As you can see, colonos, they retain for 5 hours the tribunal that was visiting Tipnis. This happened when they tried to go and speak with the other part, the part of the cocoa producers that are in Polygon 7. But the visit of the tribunal to Bolivia was an issue that, as you can see, was in all the newspapers, TV channels, radios. They were, let me see if I have another, well, you can find, I will send you a link, more than 65 front pages of different newspapers cover the visit of the commission of the tribunal. It was probably the most important action covered by the media of the tribunal in all its life. So why this is important to highlight? Because for the government, at the beginning, the government said, "Oh, this NGOs, this is not a tribunal. This is a tribunal of NGOs." They try to diminish the importance of the commission of the tribunal. But since the tribunal or the commission of the tribunal was all over the news, then finally the Minister of Interior, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Vice Minister of the Environment, they all had a meeting with the commission. So it was very interesting. They said, "We don't recognize you, but we will meet with you." And there was a meeting where the government tried to explain all the very great things they did in favor of indigenous people in Bolivia during the past decade. But when it came to the issue of nature, the environment, and the impact in relation to the Tipnis, there were no real explanations, arguments from the side of the government. So the commission of the tribunal said, "Okay, we are going to send you some questions, some written questions in relation to this, and please, we want to have your point of view because we're going to issue a report on this case." And before the commission left Bolivia, the commission of the tribunal also heard 3 other cases. Well, in reality, there are 4, but the cases that have to do with mega dams, the cases that have to do with another forest that's called the forest of the Chimans, and another case that is called of Tarquia, which I will come back at the end, because Tarquia is another protected area where the government wants to do oil exploration and oil exploitation. They want to exploit natural gas and oil in this other protected area, which is called Tarquia. And why it's important to remember this, because today in Bolivia, in the region, in the city of Tarija, where this, which is the city more close to this protected area, there is a strike of the entire population, the entire city, against the exploration and exploitation of gas and oil in this protected area. Well, the commission, going back, the commission heard all these cases, the cases of megadams and so on, and they left Bolivia. And after a couple of weeks, they sent a questionnaire with more than 30 questions to the government in relation to Tipnis. You can find all of this in a link that I will put it also in the chat. And this time the questions were so precise, with requiring information and concrete numbers and figures, that the government didn't entertain anymore and said, "Oh, we don't recognize you, we don't answer this kind of questions." And at this moment, the commission decided to elaborate its final report. This report has been issued at the beginning of this year. You can find it also on the website of the Global Alliance, and I will put the links there. And this report, it's a very long report of almost 30 pages. The most relevant part says, the Commission urges the tribunal to sanction the government of the plurinational state of Bolivia for the repeated violations of the rights of Mother Earth and other judicial bodies that recognize it is a subject of rights. So, and the Commission says that, asks for several things. One, to stop building the road. Two, to go back to the law of 2011, that was the great achievement of the indigenous March of Tipnis, that says that you cannot touch this protected area. They also say that there has to be a limit to the expansion of the colonization. The colonization in the Polygon 7 cannot continue as it is now, because if this continues, the road will sooner or later be built. No? Actually, the government is already building some bridges inside the Tipnis in the Polygon 7. So the Commission says you should stop doing that, and there should be a plan to reforest what has been deforested in Polygon 7. Because as I said before, 60% of the territory of Polygon 7 here, where you see the red image, has been deforested. And of course, the report of the Commission says, and you have to do an investigation to see why there was this repression, this violent repression in Chaparina to the indigenous march, because for the past, now it's going to be 8 years, nobody has been sanctioned for what happened to the indigenous march during the repression of the year 2011. And they also made other recommendations in relation to the process of informed prior process of consultation to indigenous people, the environmental assessment reports, and so on. And they also said in their report that there are some, that the law, because for us the rights of Mother Earth is a law, should be really implemented and should not stay as only as a speech, as words. And that there is inside this law one of the articles that establishes that there should be a defender of Mother Earth, some kind of ombudsman that will defend not humans but Mother Earth. And that this, even though it's in the law, it has not been put into practice. It doesn't exist in reality in the case of Bolivia. So the recommendation of the Commission of the Tribunal is that this should happen. Now, where are we? We are in a moment where the report has went to the Commission has went to the Tribunal, and we expect that during the next month, the Tribunal, the International Tribunal on the Rights of Nature, will issue its final verdict on the case of Tipnis. So we will see what happens, but we all know that with the report of the Commission, of course, the final sentence of the Tribunal will be very strong, requiring to stop this road. What is very interesting to see in this case is how important is a tribunal that has no really legal power. It's an ethical tribunal. But if this tribunal, this ethical tribunal, has support from social organizations, indigenous people, journalists in the media, it can have a huge impact, as we have seen in the case of Tifnis in Bolivia. And we see now, I would say that the issue of rights of nature, rights of Mother Earth, because of the visit of the Commission of the Tribunal, is now more discussed in the media and in the public opinion than it was before. And it's also helping other processes of resistance against extractivist projects, like in the case of Turkey. So to have a tribunal, even if it's only ethical until now, can have a big impact. And we think we have to even increase this even much more. We're discussing if we don't organize here in South America a session of the tribunal mainly focused on the issue of mega dams, because we have had so many disasters in relation to mega dams in South America, in Brazil, in Colombia, in Ecuador, the projects in Bolivia, and so on, and how we can bring into the discussion the issue of the impacts to nature of these huge mega dams and how they violate the rights of nature, and how can this strengthen coordination and collaboration of different social movements in South America to resist these projects. And the other part of the contribution of a tribunal is that it brings discussions that we didn't have before. For example, okay, there is the issue of implementation of the rights of Mother Earth. How do you implement them? What should be the process, the legal process, the judicial process in the case of Bolivia to address these issues? Something that is not clearly regulated in the case of Bolivia. In the case of Bolivia, different than in the case of Ecuador, there are no specific demands on the violation on the rights of Mother Earth. But the more conflicts arise in relation to this, the more the legal process will have to be clarified. And it also brings other kinds of discussions, no? If we are saying that nature has standing, this means we have to have a deep change in our judicial system, but also in the way we handle our democracy. Because if we have only a democracy where only humans can express their views and positions, then an anthropocentric democracy will never be able to bring balance to the Earth system and guarantee the rights of Mother Earth. So how nature is going to be or has to be represented in democracy? If it has legal standing, it has to have legal standing not only in relation to judicial cases, but also in relation to democracy. So these are other key issues of the discussion that are brought when we developed all these different kind of actions in relation to the defense of the rights of Mother Earth. Okay, so I finish here to give you all a little bit more of time to questions. So
Thank you so much, Pablo.
I'm open to any question.
Thank you so much. I see that I think we have had one question from Li Lua. I saw her raising her hand in the chat when I mentioned the questions. Do you have a question for Pablo? Maybe her mic is not on. We can take a question from.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Good night to everybody. Well, yes, more than question, I have to. Well, thank you, Pablo, for the historical summary that you made in relation to the Tifnis. It is clear that the case of the Tifnis is not the only case that violates the right of Mother Earth in Bolivia. And to date, they have been using the old strategies, which are marches fast. So I think we can make a different strategy. I make my my speech in Spanish, so I put on translate Google Translator. So I don't know if the translator is very well. But in Bolivia, I think it's prudent to start doing different actions in order to have different results. I saw that they, in Tiflis, do not want to carry out a criminal process to debate from the prior consultation carries about the state, considering that it is feasible to verify that the people who are in the Polygon 7 belong to other communities and that they are not from the place. So the prior consultation can be cancelled. But I feel that they are badly advised because I personally told them that one or several judicial process could be initiative that could stop the road. But they don't, I feel they don't want to do it. So they have to be clear that to enforce a right in Bolivia and the world, it is necessary to initiate a judicial and or administrative process, for which I feel that we already have enough material to start what is required by law. We cannot complain that the rights of Mother Earth are violated in corresponding action are not taken by law. The work that the court does is praiseworthy, I don't know is the correct word, and serves as a basis to initiate a real process. I know it is hard and that it will be probably take a long time, and we will face the corruption in Bolivia more thoroughly, but
Bueno,
it is
estamos
necessary
precisamente.
to do it. The government will have the obligation to answer the question of the court of Tribunal of Mother Earth, that is a real legality establishing institution. If they were asked to answer those questions through a prosecutor, and there they were obligated to respond. You have to look for the instance required by law. I hope we can have another webinar or meeting to see the feasibility of doing that. This creation in relation of the ombudsman of Mother Earth is what promotes the drafting of the. No, we sent a draft special law of the ombudsman of Mother Earth in Bolivia in December the last year, which was presented to the Chamber of Deputies. If we promote this promulgation of this proposal, we will have one more tool to enforce the right of Mother Earth in Bolivia. The only way that is implemented is through through the Defensor of Mother Earth or Ombudsman. I don't know the real traduction. So my question is for Pablo, if it's possible, if he read the proposal that we make and we present to the government, because I was listening that he told that it's good do something in Bolivia that or make an institution that make true the laws of Mother Earth, that the law be respected. So now we have a proposal in Bolivia, and we was in the Kiva Kumbh Mela in India with a lot of people. Vandana Shiva accept to advise to Bolivia in this law. So maybe we can work together. I don't know if it's possible, if Pablo want, or all the group of global right of nature want to do it, because we have in Bolivia and Ecuador, we have laws. In Bolivia in a law, in Ecuador in the constitution. But if in Bolivia we can't be like we are doing now. It's very sad listening um, mm, my colleagues told that in Bolivia it doesn't through the traits of nature, because we are not doing the correct things. It's good to make an advice, a letter to the government. They can answer or they cannot if they don't want it. But if we make a use, they are obligated, they should do it. So I feel that some people are advising, they are not giving good advices to the communities in Bolivia, because they say, oh no, the law, it doesn't work, there are a lot of corruption, so they don't start. I see in Ecuador and in other countries in the world, they start a choose. They know that it's very hard. They know that it's a lot of time, but they do it. If in Bolivia we don't do that, never will happen anything. So I think it's better that Pablo, that has more relationship with the Timis community, told them they make a choose to the government. I talk with the community. I tell them and told them we can do, and in Spanish es un proceso penal por uso de instrumento falsificado. Entonces, but I feel another people tell them, oh no, this is not a good advice. Here is not correct. But if they don't do that, they don't have how to prove that that consult is wrong.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
that's all. Thank
yeah,
you.
we have some questions pending. So I was just thinking, is it okay if Pablo answers the question you asked a minute ago?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Let's see. I think you're muted, Pablo.
Maybe it will be better to give also time to Lisa that has a question, and so and Terren and others, so that we don't run out of time.
Yeah, we have time for those questions as well. So that's no problem.
Okay. Yes. In the case of Bolivia, I agree with everything that's Luia Lua says. There are. I think that we have to present cases on legal courts, but it's not the perception of the majority. I would say even of environmental activists, indigenous people, is, well, it doesn't work because the government controls the judicial system, which is true. But I agree that even though the government controls the judicial system, we still have to present legal cases for many violations that are happening now. Because that is the way to open the possibility for rights of nature to really be enforced. And we have to even move further asking for institutions like the defender of Mother Earth to be put in place. Now, this year is an electoral year in Bolivia, so we are having elections in October. And what will happen with the rights of nature, rights of Mother Earth in Bolivia, in a way will be revisited next year very much if there is a new government. What you see now is that some political parties of the opposition to the government begin to defend the environment, begin to defend nature, because they are in opposition to the government. Will they continue to defend nature once they become the new governments? That is one of the key questions. For example, this national strike that we are having now, this strike that we're having in the city of Tarija, the most important city linked to fossil fuels in Bolivia, defending a protected area, cannot be understood if we don't look at the contradictions between political parties in this process of elections. But definitely, I think it's very important to try to move forward in this orientation.
Thank you so much, Pablo. So then we have a question from Teran. Teran, do you want to ask the question yourself, or do you want me to read it?
I can go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
This is wonderful. Thank you for taking my question and also for organizing this this webinar. So my name's Taryn. I'm from Canada, living on Indigenous territory of the Wendat, Huron, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe peoples. I'm also a graduate student at the University of Toronto, and I'm interested in how the rights of nature, and in particular the tribunals, are being used as a mechanism for building grassroots power, and in particular a space for where we can hear from women and women's voices. So my question is, can you talk about gender in the rights of nature struggle in Bolivia? Who are the cocoa producers, and what are their interests with respect to the kinds of reproductive labor they need and want? Like, what's the model of agriculture there with respect to gender? And what is the role of women in the struggle against the road? Thank you.
Yeah, so the main leaders currently of Tipnis are women. Most of the men leaders have been captured by the government or have declined. So the main leaders in the case of Tipnis now are women, are mainly two women. You have a very big participation of women in the defense of Tipnis. But I must say that if we remember the visit of the commission of the tribunal to the Tipnis, the main speakers and the ones that had a special dress to address to the commission of the tribunal were men. So you have a contradiction because you have women in the front line, but for representative issues, men still will have a much bigger role, especially from the communities. In the case of the cocoa producers are also indigenous people, but are indigenous people that have migrated from the highlands to the lowlands. And they went there, and they live, and their way of living is to plant coca leaf. And that coca leaf that is planted mainly in this region is or ends up being a raw material for cocaine. because in the case of Bolivia, there are other regions where they produce coca leaf that we use to chew, and indigenous people normally chew. But the coca leaf that is produced in this part that is inside Tipnis, it's mainly for cocaine. So it's a very complicated issue, the issue of coca leaf. It's not easy. The policy of the US and right-wing governments has been to do repression against them, like what we have seen in the case of Colombia mainly. Now, Evo Morales comes from the coca producers. His community is very near to the Polygon 7. He has had a different approach, which is to have an agreement with the coca producers, not to have repression to them. I agree with this part, but it has went a little bit further. Nobody can enter that area if it's not with the agreement of the coca producers. So it is like a free territory inside our country. So it's correct not to use repression. It's correct to seek agreement, and through agreement to try to control and reduce coca production. But what we have now is a small nation inside the nation, and there are many complicated things, illegal things happening there. So this is an issue. Of course, if you look at the global scale, you will say, oh, in Bolivia, coca production doesn't increase in the same proportion than in Colombia or Peru. It's true. Compared to that, this model is much better. But compared to what indigenous people that live in the territory of Tipnis want, it's very different because they are being invaded by them. So you have to look at the issue of coca producers from the different perspectives, and mainly from the perspective of the other indigenous people that have lived in Tipnis for centuries and centuries of years.
Thank you so much, Pablo. So we have 2 questions left. So we have one from Lisa, and then we have one here that came from Paula. So, and then we will have to finish off the webinar. However, you can send your questions to my email that I will be sharing with you later. So Lisa, do you want to present your question?
Yeah, thank you for explaining the history and the current situation relating to Tipnis, Pablo. I really appreciate that, and the organizers for getting this together. So yeah, the question, I mean, in the Ecuadorian constitution, the law empowers individuals to take action to defend nature, which is a good development in its own right, because that's already quite a new thing. But I wonder, when you talked about representing nature in our democratic processes, do you or the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature have suggestions as to how that could happen? You know, how does nature, when it has no voice, actually achieve a voice at the table, as opposed to relying on humans to bring? Obviously humans are part of nature, but there's a sort of inherently anthropocentric element if it always relies on the human voice bringing other parts of nature into the democratic process, if you see what I mean.
Yes, of course. This is a very important issue. We are starting the discussion. Of course, you cannot have a tree speaking in a parliament, but you can have representatives that, instead of representing indigenous people, women, workers, they are elected to represent trees or to represent nature. And you can have a certain percentage of parliamentarians that are elected with that purpose. This is one way. There are others that suggest what we can do is to have a in some countries we have two chambers. We have the lower chamber, the parliamentarians, and then we have the Senate. Let's have a third chamber, which is of representatives that will represent nature. And they will be the ones in this chamber of nature where they will look at all the issues that involve nature as a whole, rivers, trees, birds, and so on. So they are not, it's not only a ministry of the environment that is below the executive power. No, it is part of the democracy as a third chamber or space. There are some that say, hey, we should combine. It should be a combination of, if there is, for example, a chamber only for nature, then part should be elected by the population. Part should come from indigenous people. Part should come from the academics, from the scientists, so that there is really a democratic body that takes into account all these different aspects. It's not only persons that are elected by vote, but also persons that come from academic, scientific institutions, or from indigenous people that have lived for many years in harmony with nature. The key issue is that we cannot think of rights of nature only in the judicial system without looking at the electoral representative democratic system. We have to also address this. And I think we are at the beginning of a new development in the saga and the struggle of rights of nature.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So we have one last question from Paula before we close the session. Let's see here, I think you're unmuted. Let's see. Paula, do you hear me? I can maybe read the question instead. Yeah, yes. So she says, hi there, thanks for organizing the webinar. Many thanks, Pablo, for the great presentation. Indeed, the lack of independence between powers is a huge issue in Bolivia. In this line, I'd like to ask you about the role of the national agro-environmental tribunals in relation to the enforcement of rights of nature. Thanks.
Well, the role of the agro-environmental tribunal in relation to the enforcement of rights of nature is zero, nothing at all. The main issue that they deal with is the issue of land rights. When there are conflicts among owners of different kind of properties in rural areas. It can be indigenous territories, it can be agribusiness landowners of titles, but until now it has not got involved in the issue of rights of nature. The issue in the case of Bolivia is that all this judicial system, all these tribunals, the Constitutional Tribunal, the Agro-Environmental Tribunal, were created by the Constitution before the country adopted the rights of Mother Earth. And definitely, if we are going to fully implement the rights of Mother Earth, we have to change, we have to modify and adapt many of the functions of these different judicial bodies that we have already in our country, but don't look at the issue of rights of nature. at all. Well, thank you to all from my side, and very happy to answer any other question that you can have.
Yes, thank you so much.
You can just send me an email and I will answer to you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for your participation. And as I wrote in the chat, if you have any questions left, or if other questions come to mind, you can send them to my email and I can forward them to Pablo. If you wish to participate in more webinars, we will have one last webinar session of this current series in the end of April with Vandana Shiva from India. So if you're interested, you can enter the link here in the chat to learn more about that. I will also be sending you an evaluation form for this webinar, a very short one, and I will be super grateful if you could share your thoughts and feedback with Garn, as it is very valuable information for us at Garn, but also the speaker, also for Pablo. So thank you so much again, and thank you so much, Pablo. Yeah, so you email me for any questions, and I hope to see you at other future webinars. Thank you.